hiring technicians, and how I screwed up, all on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez. Happy to be with you on a great Monday. Man, I feel back to normal again. I'm so happy. It's actually quiet around here. My wife left me, but no, not permanently. She just left me for 2 weeks. She went with her family to actually travel to Guatemala and to visit her family over there, and with her mom and her dad, and took my son, who they haven't met, and she wanted the whole family to meet him. So took my 2-year-old son on a what seemed to be probably about a 4-hour plane ride, because they had to go from Miami all the way to Colombia, to South America, and then over to Central America back to go to Guatemala, and she felt like dropping him off the plane. He is a handful, guys. That little boy is a handful. He is like me, on steroids and out of control. But, you know, she's having a good time over there, and I spent the weekend here with my daughter, just me and her, all by ourselves all weekend, and it's been really, really quiet around here. I don't know what to do with all this quietness, but in any case, it's been good. You know, a cold is doing better. Nobody in the family has a cold. I mean, guys, if you have kids, you know it. If you don't have kids, you have no idea. But, you know, one gets it, and then the other gets it, and then the other gets it. And by the time we're done, everybody's got it. And you just can't shake this darn thing for 2 to 3 weeks. You know, it's hideous, just trying to, and it has just been the weather down here, I guess. And, you know, it's more than usual. I don't get that sick that often. I maybe get a cold maybe once a year. That's it. And it's been like number 3 this year, number 4, I think. And it's just, you know, hideous. But I'm so glad to be here. So glad that you're here, you know, getting things done in this industry, an industry that needs many things. It needs much training, much help, much education. And I think that we need to start moving in the right direction. And I think that this podcast can definitely help. It's not a solution to solve everything. It's not the definitive guide to the pest management industry or the pest management business, but it's just, consider it as a tool. For some of you, it'll be a screwdriver. For other you, it'll be a hammer. But, you know, consider it a tool that can help the industry, a voice in the industry that can help. And really, it's about the industry. It's about you, the small business owner. It's about the independent tech who started up and is struggling. It's about the technician who's out there beating his head against the wall on the front lines. It's definitely not for the large companies. You know, they've got their thing. They've got all the money. They've got all the training. They've got the resources. They've got everything they need for them to be successful. But it is the underdog, the guy who's out there every day just trying to make a living for his family, figuring it out day by day. That's who this podcast is dedicated to and for. And I think that together, I'm having a conversation on Facebook and in a couple of groups about the issue of the last podcast about certifiable training. And what I'm learning is that I live in Florida, and you got to understand, I'm in Miami. I'm in Florida. I'm not all over the country. I don't have experience all over the country. There are plenty of people out there who have experience from all over the country that could really contribute something to the Pest Geek Society, to the podcast. Either they're too busy or they don't want to get involved in the controversy. That's fine. You know, I don't need you to be on the microphone, but, you know, your information, your wealth, and I get a lot of, I'm on about 4 groups right now. I'm active really on one and, you know, semi-active on another, and trying to understand what you're going through, understand the things that are different in your part of the country. Things are different, radically different, and I'm finding out in other parts of the country. And sometimes I get tunnel vision. I'm human. I'm here in Miami. I'm looking at the situation here, the situation in Florida. If you're in the South, you know that wages in the South and income in the South and is much lower than it is in the Northeast and in the North. And even then it gets tough over there. So it's radically different for pest control. It's radically different for what you do, application. One thing that you say on a thread that works for you somewhere in the country might not work where you're at. A lot of things people talk about, I'm astonished. I said that I can't do that here. It won't work. Other things is, what you're able to charge for a lot of services. And what we can charge down here is a whole lot less than what you can charge up in the Northwest, even on the West Coast in California. So it's totally radically different. And there's a seat for every butt. I've always said this podcast is not for everybody, but it is for those people who really want to do something different in their life, have something to share, something to contribute. If you've got 15 years of experience, you have something to contribute. So that's what I'm shooting for, is to get you the best training, to get you the best information, get the best knowledge out there to you, on this podcast in a different format, different than in a blog. A lot of people do not have the time to read, a 1,000 word blog or be on a blog every day reading, but you can definitely learn and listen and get something out there to you on a daily basis, if you choose to, by just going to and listening. And I think that is probably the best thing. But there is a lot of controversy because there's a big divide. And I think there's a big divide in this industry between unlike I've seen in any other industry, by the way, between regulators, between educators, being the universities, entomologists. There's a big divide between the entomologist and the field, and a big divide between the entomologist, the extension service, and the field. And those who are actually out there doing it, and the ones out there doing it feel like regulators and educators have no clue what they're going through. And you know what? That might be so. Because if you've never been in the field, if you've been in the lab, and you've been behind a textbook, and you're not out in the field understanding what they're going through as a business. Because what educators think of is you're just doing it wrong. And there's blame to go around to everybody. This is not isolated to one particular group. The educators, I listen to them because I believe that they have something to contribute. And I can do that. I can eat fish. And learning to disseminate information and understand people is like eating fish. You got to learn to take the bones out so you don't choke on it. And a lot of people just choke on things when they hear what they don't like to hear or what they don't understand. But there is a need for education. A formal education, to sit down in a classroom, open up a book, and try to understand something from the educational side, which is applicable. And then taking out and implementing that in the field. I think I've always been a student. I've always been in some type of classroom environment. I don't thrive there, but I understand that it's needed. And I can see it both ways. Nothing is going to happen because the industry is not going to vote itself into more regulation. So we were having a discussion about certifiable training versus verifiable training. And I think there's a difference because what one person calls, in Florida, you have what is known, so we can start having a dialogue and understanding each other. And I was talking to some people overseas in Europe, and totally different vocabulary. Vocabulary means something. And when I sit here, and in Florida, you're a certified pest control operator. You're a CPCO. In other places, it's a CPO. In other places, the same position, a person who runs a company, who trains the techs, is a certified applicator. To me, a certified applicator, in my mind, is a person who applies the chemical, not the operator. And so it's different terminologies and different thing that keeps us sometimes from understanding each other. And I think we need to open up the dialogue and people not be so dogmatic about their position. See, one thing I've learned is I don't want to be dogmatic. I don't want to get tunnel vision. I don't want to see things just from my perspective. I want to be out there experiencing what other people experience, because that enriches my life. Some people are like, no, it's all I need to know is right here. That's it. I don't want to get involved in anything else. And you get closed into a bubble. And you're not able to then relate to others. And you're not able to relate to other people in the industry. So the dialogue is important to start that. We started a thread on Facebook and in a couple of places asking the questions, because techs are frustrated in the field where they're being kept stupid by some companies on purpose so that they don't have to get their wages raised. As long as you can keep mediocre techs doing mediocre work, you can keep their pay low. And those that rise to the top have to find another place to work or go work for themselves because they get limited. There's a frustration there. The owners have a frustration because they can't seem to hire people that are much more better educated. And I don't think that's a good way of grammar putting it. But anyway, you get my point. And they feel like they're overregulated. As far as I can see, I've been in highly regulated industries. This industry is not highly regulated. I see no problem with, if you want to be a tech, to get what then we need to call now verifiable training, that your training has been verified by somebody. A certification, I guess it's different, and people look at it. I'm a certified pest control operator, and I want a certified technician. That's what I'm looking for. And I have to do it myself because there's no place you can get certified technicians. You got to train your own. Creates a problem. So understand that where you're at, I mean, Miami is not the United States, and I've learned that because I've been in other places and I've traveled to other cities and other states, not in the pest control business, but in other businesses, and it is different. There's a big difference between a Midwesterner and a Northeasterner. I mean, talk about clashing. So I think that it's important that the dialogue gets opened and discuss a lot of the issues that nobody wants to talk about. Owners don't want to talk about it. Employees are much more vocal. You're not going to hear much from it seems like the educators stay on one side of the fence. The manufacturers and the distributors are on the other side. The technicians and the companies are somewhere in the middle. And overseeing all this are the regulators, and there's a huge disconnect. And everybody would like to get together, but nobody's willing to. And I think that we have to start looking at all four sides and saying, how does this work? And the reality is that I am an idealistic dreamer. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm more of an idealistic dreamer of things that can be done. But it requires taking a step. And nobody's going to step up to the plate and ask for more regulation. The technicians aren't going to want verifiable training. If you're a crappy technician and you don't know what you're doing and you don't want to learn and you're lazy, you're not going to want anybody certain because that's going to cost you your job. The guys at the top who are really good, who buy their own equipment, who invest in their own books, who go out and study, are being held back by the lower part. And that's always the case. In high thriving organizations, what you will find is that you get the right people on the bus to do the right jobs, and then you start getting rid of the people that are underperformers and get rid of them. Let them be somebody else's, mediocre employee. But that's how you do it. And that's harsh, but that's how it's done to get the best people. So I wanted to talk about the whole issue of training and hiring technicians and start getting into that because I've made my mistakes. And I'm sure that you have too, but if you've never done it, it's very hard. I want to give thank you to a bunch of people because, man, am I getting inundated with likes and thank yous and comments and people following us, and the podcast is just exploding. And I just want to give thanks to more than one person on this occasion. Christian Kristen Fears gave us a review on the Pest Geek podcast on Facebook. He says, "Hi, Frank, from upstate New York. My name is Christian, and I've been in the pest control industry for 4 years now with a locally owned company. I'm always striving to make myself better, a better technician, and a better person in general. Thank you for providing us with the information, insight, book, products, and recommendation, everything else you bring forth. Keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to the future podcast. Take care and hope you and your family get well soon." Well, thank you. We're doing a lot better. Thank you for that. See, the goal is it's not just about marketing. It's not just about how to grow a business. It's about how do we make an impact in people's lives. I also want to thank Brent Towell on Facebook for, the support, liking us. A person with I see that has great insight and that I learn something from every time you post something. So thank you for your contribution, not only to me, but to in the groups that you're in and the things that you're posting. I really do appreciate that. Kenny Guzman also gave us a 5-star review. Amazing show, invaluable info. Whether you agree or not, you will get an honest, informed opinion. Keep it up. Thank you. And also David Anders, who gave us a like on our Facebook. Thank you so much, guys. On Point Pest Control at On Point Pest on Twitter is following us. Also, PCT Magazine is following us on Twitter. Thank you for following us. We put out a lot of your stuff to the audience because it is valuable. Thank you so much for that. And then Shannon Pest Control at Shannon Pest Control on Twitter is following us. A whole bunch of people. It's just, I used to get 1 and 2 reviews, and now it's like, a floodgate of people following us and looking at our material. So I'm so grateful for that. I would also like to ask this audience if you can do me a great favor. If you can go to iTunes and go to the iTunes store. If you're on the iTunes app and you do a search for Pest Geek Podcast, you will see there's a little spot there at the top to give us a review. And if you click the review, would you give us a review on iTunes? Because that will really help us in the rankings in iTunes and getting that podcast exposed to other people. Remember, everything is about if you're being liked and you're being shared, then you get more, you get pushed up the list. And we want that, and we want this podcast to be available to as many people as possible. So if you will go ahead and give us an iTunes review, I would greatly appreciate that. Also, on our website, we joined the society. We're trying to get things done. If you agree with what I'm doing, and you might not agree with everything, and that's okay. I welcome your disagreement. You can post that too, and that's okay. Where you disagree with me on. And it might be just a regional thing, a local thing. It might be on fundamental things. But that's okay. You can disagree with me. And I give equal time to anybody on this microphone who wants to come on and have a discussion or a debate. As long as you're respectful to the audience and respectful to me, and I'll be respectful to you. I think that's vitally important. I think it's vitally important to have a different point of view to get things done. It's not about whether you agree with me or not. It's about, can we agree on one thing? Can we agree on something that makes the industry better? We're all guilty of 2 things. Number one is affirming things, that we believe, and sometimes denying other things. And what one person asserts, the other one denies, and sometimes both are right. And that's just phenomenal to be able to see that. So join the conversation, 707-395-7378. If you want to join in on the podcast, greatly appreciated. The tech tip today is actually going to be groups, Facebook groups. There's 4 of them that I really like. One is Pest Control Professionals. The other one is Pest Cemetery, U.S. Pest Management Professionals, and Pest Control Experts Worldwide. A couple of groups for you to join and be active on. And I'm listening to the threads and what people are saying. And I said, if you're going to be part of a group, don't just join and absorb, but have something to contribute. Get involved. Get involved. I did a questionnaire on Facebook, which I'm going to get to. But I want to also, what's going on? The 2016 International Conference of Entomology is rocking. A bunch of real insect geeks over there, and and arthropod geeks. And there's two guys that have a podcast for entomology, not for pest control, but for entomology. And it's Morgan's show, and he's got a show at breakingbio.com. And then Jonathan Larson has an arthropod, which is arthropod.blogspot.com. There's links to all this, by the way, on the podcast. But these guys have an entomology podcast, and if you're interested in that, go check them out. I think it's really cool. They got featured on Entomology Today in the International Congress of Entomology, known as ICE. So, hey, check it out. Getting on to our main topic today of what I want to talk about. Hiring either your first technician or hiring technicians, and where I screwed up royally. And I've had to hire a lot of people in my lifetime, in my professional career, in my other businesses, in just being a manager, a store manager. And there is a big difference between you hiring as an independent business owner, a technician, and working for a large company that has an HR department and doing the hiring. And I'll tell you the difference in my experience of what I experienced in the past of hiring. I needed to hire an employee. I needed to hire 2 employees. I needed to hire 3 employees. And we had HR departments for these large companies. I worked for really 2 really big multi-billion-dollar companies, and who are nationwide, and some are worldwide now. And when I had to hire an employee, I simply called the HR department and says, listen, I need 2 employees for this. I need 2 clerks. I need to hire an installer. And they would vet, background check, do all the prospecting, and then they would send me a list of qualified employees for the job that I had. They already had a process in place to hire the right people for the right job. And then they would send me a list, and then I would interview them, but they were already qualified. These guys already had their references checked. They had a criminal background check. They had, every application was done. They could work for the money that we were offering. And it was a matter of me saying which one I wanted to work with. And then once I picked them, I said, okay, now you got to go back and get all your paperwork filled out and get your drug testing done and show up on Monday. That was my hiring process. It was literally an interview with 4 or 5 people. I would invest maybe 3 to 5 hours tops interviewing 4 to 5 people for a job. 99% of the work was done for me. As an independent owner, that's much tougher. That is a bear. And why so few people in this industry want to hire a technician, a real technician. Why so few people want to grow. Why so few people can, because they lack those skills to do that. Unless you were a branch manager, or unless you were a regional manager, or unless you were a customer service manager, in some capacity where you had to train and lead people. This is foreign to you. You were a tech, you quit, you started your job, and now you're growing, and you need somebody. You need a warm body. You need somebody with a pulse to take some of this burden off of you, to do some of the work. And I made the terrible mistake of hiring a worker and not training a tech, because I needed warm bodies. And most of the time I had to hire a lot of subcontractors because we did landscaping and we did installations and we did things like that. So I worked mainly with workers, people that I had to supervise. And there's a difference between a technician and a worker. You have to highly supervise. You can't leave the site. You got to be giving constant direction. You got to tell them what to do. Techs in the field is totally different because they have to work interdependently and unsupervised for the most part. There's nobody there constantly inspecting their work. It's not like when I put a row of plants and I said, guys, that's on level. And that one is, they're supposed to be 18 inches apart. And that one is 22 inches apart. And the other one is 16. It looks hideous. You need to fix that. Once the dirt was thrown and everything, that was very hard to undo. When I get a call from a client in the field saying, hey, your guy was just here and he, left all these leaves in the back and he didn't blow it out. Things that are visible are not visible in the pest control. Nobody can tell really if you applied that chemical correctly or not. You can't see it. What people either notice is either the results that they have bugs or they don't have bugs. Much harder to do in a lot of businesses. It's like the pool cleaning when I had a pool cleaning business. There's a streak in the middle of the pool. How did you miss that? Things that are different in pest control than other experiences that I had. In the glass business, we installed glass. That glass, you can see a gap of a 1/4 inch from one side or another. That glass wasn't cut incorrectly. When they did siding, when I did decks. See, these are things that workers are used to doing work. And it's so much different for a technician. And so what I recommend is here's what I was told by a couple of people. You're better off having an imperfect process than no process at all. And the problem with a lot of technicians that become owners is a lot of the reasons they left is they hate the processes of companies. They hate protocols, processes, and procedures, yet they have to implement them, and they're dogmatic about how they do it and how they do pest control, and it can't be done any other way but the way they do it, and makes it very hard for you to hire people because your expectations a lot of the time are the expectations you have for yourself and what you expect from other people. And they're never going to do it exactly the same. They're not going to be as passionate, as thorough, as equipped, as knowledgeable as you. And that's hard for a lot of people to deal with. I know for me, it is a lot of the time, and I had to change things. I have a friend of mine who is a mentor to me. Brilliant man, great heart. He's almost like a big brother. And when I was a youth minister, I ministered to his kids. And later in life now, he's doing a lot of ministering in my life. And I came to him with a lot of things that I wanted to do in the business and all these ideas and things that I wanted to go. And he didn't say anything. He let me do it. I've come back about 2 years later and I say, here's what I'm struggling with. And I says, when you came to me with all those ideas, I didn't say anything. I let you do it. Now, this is a man who is a biological engineer, who also happens to be a mechanical engineer and an electrical engineer. And he deals with multi-million-dollar plants. He has no employees right now, and he travels all over the world. And his specialty is retrofitting oil processing plants for food-grade oils all over the world and increasing production by 30 to 50%. Without having to redo a plant. A plant that would cost $2 to $10 million to do, he can do somewhere retrofit between $100,000 and $250,000 and get you 40, 50% more production. Brilliant guy. Built oil plants all over the country, all over the world. And he sat me down and he said, look, the problem with you is you're too idealistic. Here's from an engineer. Who engineers are perfectionists. He says, I'm a perfectionist. You're an idealist. And sometimes your ideals are too big. They're too lofty. And you're looking for someone just like you, and you're not going to find him. I have a guy working for me who, he's running one of my plants now. He's got a bachelor's degree in his country. speaks 5 languages, and I have him doing one thing and one thing only. I don't have him doing 10. He's not going to be able to do what I've done in the last 35 years with my experience. That will take me a decade to get him there. So I need him to do one thing and do one thing right, and that's all I hired him to do. And he tries to go invent and do this and that. I said, no, this is what I hired you to do. Stay here. This is what you do. So hiring process of technicians has to do with having the right mindset. I want to go over some statistics because, nobody knows really where this industry is. And it's mind-blowing to me how the so-called experts really don't know where this industry is. IBIS came out with IBIS World Pest Control Market Report. And this is going to help me prove a point and help you see some things. Market Research Report. This is March 2016. Okay? The pest control industry is a $14 billion a year industry with 209,000 employees with 23,940 companies. So if you take that number and you divide it, you end up with approximately 4.47 employees per company. You can see that the average business is really a really, really small company. The biggest amount is in Florida, actually. The Southeast region, greatest share industry established 38.3% of the total in 2016. Florida has 14.3% of the total industry establishments. 14% are in Florida. You can see why I have so many competition here, so many issues, and so many problems that we talk about. But the South is 38% of the pest control industry. Now, if I take the 2016 guide that PCT put out about their marketing and the industry, I get a totally different number. Not even close. 154,500 service technicians. That's 57,000 more. That's, 50% more than what we have in the IBIS market research. $3.16 billion in residential service revenue and $2.89 in commercial revenue. $1.41 billion in termite revenue. So they get a total of $7.46 billion. Where are they getting their numbers? Because if I take those numbers, then I end up with about 7.85 employees per company. That's a big difference. They got their numbers from the Strategic Analysis of U.S. Structural Pest Control Industry 2014. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics gives a 3.4 year compound annual growth rate on a 5-year. They're claiming in a lot of the last years and the year before that, the industry has saw an increase of 3% on average. And then I say, well, where are they getting a lot of those numbers? Well, they tabulate about 6.1 billion of those numbers just from the top 100 list. So I don't know if we're out of tune with what's really going on in the world, but the numbers from the U.S. Department of U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has the employment of pest control technicians at 70,250, with a mean hourly wage of $16.39 and a mean annual salary of $34.80. Florida claims it has, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 9,960, has the most technicians of any other state. California is right next to that, which is 9,320, and Texas at 5,610. Texas, being a way bigger state, has a lot fewer pest control technicians, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Then comes Georgia at 4,190 and North Carolina at 3,110. Florida has the largest at 1.26 technicians per job. So 1.26% of the employment is in pest control. Compare that to North Carolina, which is 0.75, and Texas, which is 0.48. So Texas, you can see why, just by looking at those numbers, why in some parts of the country you have a lot less competition. You got a lot more territory and a lot less competition. And you can charge a lot more for your pest control than you can in the South and in South Florida. We've got 4,258 pest control companies in Florida. How many do you have in your state? Look at your numbers. Ask your state for the numbers. So hiring technicians can be a real challenge depending on those market statistics. So I did a Facebook group survey, and I asked the two Facebook groups that I did it on, what would you spend if if Florida, here's what, this is based on my experience in Florida. And a lot of people sometimes can't relate to the question I ask because I ask it based from a position that I am in Florida. And I asked, you just hired your first technician. You've got 40 hours to train him before you can let him loose on his own. Not that you will, but that's what you have. That's the law. Then third is, what will you spend your first 40 hours training on? First answer is you can't do any training in 40 hours. There's a very fatalistic view of some people of nothing can be done. Immediately, those responses started coming out. So I asked the question, okay, but what will you teach on? No answer. What will you teach on? No answer. What will you I must have asked that question at least 24 times repeatedly throughout the whole thread, until finally some people started answering, which either lets me to believe they don't know what they would do, they don't know what they would teach, even though they got 15 years of experience, or they didn't feel like getting involved in that thread because, why wouldn't you answer? Some of the most experienced guys that I know who have experience that lead big companies, or at least have a lot of experiences, started answering. I asked the same question in another group, and I got totally different answer from that group. One group was very focused on the importance of the technical aspect. I mean, teaching that technician, techniques on how to control pests, equipment, chemical, mixing, the stuff that everybody seems to want to talk about. That seems to be like the most important thing. The other group was fascinating because they focused more on the quality of customer service and relationship to the customer. That was a huge revelation to me. One group just talks about one particular thing and focuses on that, while the other group was focused more on making sure that they're liked by the customer, making sure they're out there and they're relating to the customer, make sure they can give good customer service. And that was like the continuous thread on that. And I was like looking at this and I'm fascinated by this, that two groups, the majority answers are totally different initially. Both stressed the importance of label knowledge and laws, equipment and technique. And both believe you can't teach much in 40 hours. Okay, we're going to discuss in the next podcast what I would teach in the first 40 hours. I'm giving you a glimpse of what's coming up ahead. Hiring workers versus hiring technicians. At first, I hired workers. And here's the mentality that I had. I hired people that needed a job. How did I hire people? Well, a friend came and said, hey, listen, I have a friend of mine who's needing a job and I know that you have a lot of work. And I had a lot of work at that time. I was running multiple projects at the same time. And I said, yeah, I'll give him a job. I need this done. I need, fertilizing done. I need, I need somebody to go and do some landscaping. I need somebody to pick up garbage. I need to do, this project is going to require removing, 10,000 pounds of dirt from this area. We need to do that. And I would give them a job. And then I would take some of those people and say, you might work good for the pest control. Let me give them a shot with that. And they were great workers, but they were workers. And I could not leave them alone, or they would mess everything up. I would leave the site, and I would come back an hour later, and there was a pipe busted, and water was gushing up 20 feet in the air because somebody busted a main pipe. And when I said, look, the main pipe is over here, make sure you don't hit it with a pick or axe or anything. And they would still do that. Hired workers. I hired people that were pretty much at the bottom. They needed a job. They needed to put food on the table. And I'm one of those guys that I can't stand to see people suffering and hurting. And I said, yeah, I'll give him a job even if he can't do much. I've had guys that I totally lost my mind with. So what are the things that you have to look for in a pest control technician? One is, does he have career goals? That's number one. What are his career goals? What does this person want to do? See, a lot of the times we spend time talking about what we do and what we need and what we have, and we don't know what that person wants and if they will even be a fit for us long term. If they will be with us 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 5, because we don't know anything about that person. What are their career goals? Just hiring somebody because they need a job is not enough. You want to avoid the jack of all trades, master of none. The guy who says he can do everything. Because what that tells me is he's never spent any time considering what he can be really good at. It could be that he's young, and that's fine. But when somebody's 50 years old and they do everything and they haven't really settled on one thing, they're not an expert at one thing, do you really want that person working for you? I mean, it's fine if you run a tent crew. You need a guy to jump on a ladder and put a tent up and put a tent down. And he's going to do that 100 times a day. There's a big difference between doing fume and putting up a tent and actually doing pest control. Big difference. What do you need them for? So you got to establish, first of all, a really good job description, detailed, what that person is actually going to do day in and day out, so you can match the right person to the right job. Hiring people with the wrong attitude and the wrong aptitude will sink you. See, as long as those guys didn't have any interaction with the client, they were good workers. They would show up on time. They would work all day. I would pay them, and they were gone. Their attitude could suck a bit, but I would say, hey, listen, this needs to get done. Do I want that guy around my clients? That was a big mistake I made with one tech. He was great on one-on-one. He was great at doing the work. He could not relate to the client. He could not relate a worker who could not relate to a client who made $350,000, made $1 million a year, and was expecting perfection. And he thought his work was good enough. He couldn't do that. And constantly the customer would say, but I did my job right. I did it according to spec. It was done exactly. Yes, but perception is reality. And in that customer's eyes, you didn't. And you need to address those situations. People who can't take criticism from the client, thinking that everybody's questioning their work. And the client is used to seeing me do it one way, and I'm taking my time, and I look for this and I look for that, and he just comes in and applies the same chemical, applied it to all the same places, did exactly the same thing, but because he did it faster, because he didn't ask questions, because he didn't interact with the client, you see, he couldn't relate to that client. I agree. You're not going to be able to teach much in 40 hours. This is why everybody ran with me for at least 3 months, and I introduced them to every client, and I saw things that, you hire a guy, and until you actually see him doing the work, I said, this guy's not going to work out. And what do you do at that point? When you've hired him already and you say he's not going to work out, you've interviewed him, he came to work for you, and you see him in the field working, and you realize he's not going to work out. Training people will only do so much. Training cannot correct a lot of deficiencies in their character. Training cannot correct attitude. And training cannot correct aptitude. Those three things have to be there, and it's very hard to do. So, people that are very, very difficult to train or keep are going to be people that already have a vast amount of experience. That's also a double-edged sword. Because you got to find a fit. If you're an IPM company and this guy comes from a spray-only company, he's already bringing a ton of bad habits that you have to undo. And that makes it very, very difficult for you to train. You got to invest double the time in him to get him to undo that. Unless he's the kind of guy who's sick of the spray-only company and he wants to be a good technician, and then he's willing to learn. You got to know that up front. Versus the guy who comes from an IPM company and you're a spray-only company, you're going to have a lot of clash with that guy because he's not going to want to spray. He's going to want to take his time. He's going to want to do things perfectly. And you just want him to spray something and move on to the next customer and get it done. He's not a fit for your organization. It's not good or bad. It's like you're trying to fit, a size 12 foot, into a 10 size shoe. Doesn't fit. It's going to be very uncomfortable. Hiring entrepreneurs, guys who've already owned pest control businesses and decided they couldn't do it, couldn't make it, had a bad luck, and then now they kind of want to come and work for you. Can you take that person and have them listen to you and do things your way? It's going to be very, very hard. Very hard. Unless that person is willing to say, I understand I'm no longer an employee. I'm no longer a business owner. I'm now an employee. And to reduce himself to that role mentally is very difficult. There's a third group that most people do not consider to hire. And I think that if you are smart and you are disciplined and you are a fan of processes and systems, which I am, you see, you need structure, you need order, you need things to go smoothly, you need things step 1, step 2, step 3. We always follow these. You can't be a renegade, run out there. I know technicians that their truck says everything about them. It has dents everywhere. It's rusted. Equipment is thrown in the back any way they want to. And I show up and I said, I would never work for you. You're a disaster. I wouldn't work for you because you're like, you just whatever. And you can't wake up one morning and feel one way and wake up the next morning and feel a different way and expect your people to keep up. You can't change your mind about management and training and things today and then have a different opinion tomorrow. It will drive your people insane. They need stability. Employees are not owners. Employees don't roll well with punches. They need stability and they need order. They're like children. That's the mind of an employee. And what a lot of times what we want is employees to think like owners. And that's not going to be possible because then you end up with an owner and then he quits on you in 2 years and becomes your competition. You got to hire the right people. This third group expects leadership and does not require a lot of management. They expect good salaries. They expect some form of benefits. They will not work and cannot work with inexperienced managers or micromanagers. Here's the group: military and first responders. Whether they are honorably discharged, retired, active service, EMT paramedics, firefighters, and police. All these guys are used to working in a structured, tiered environment where there's order, there's protocols, there's policies, there's procedures, and you don't violate those, because when you do, people's lives are at stake, and they take that very seriously. And if you have an organization where you don't have structure, and you don't have order, and you don't have policies, and you don't have procedures, and you don't enforce them, you will end up with a lot less than this. This is where the industry is. This is the problem that people complain about, that I hear constantly. This is where customers don't think your people are worth anything. Why every time your technician doesn't do something right, they pick up the phone and call you. It should be the one that should be facing the client every single time when something goes wrong is the tech. The tech should give face to the company. The tech should be the one that takes responsibility. The tech is the one that's in the field. The tech is the one. And if you don't raise your people up to do that, you will be getting the call. And the office gets the call. These people don't need to be highly managed. They have a backbone. They understand how to work in stressful situations. They understand how to do critical thinking. Do you want to have those people around you, or do you want to hear what Trump said on national television, where he says, I want to be around people that are less than me because that way I can be more important? I don't agree with that. I agree with get the best people. But you got to pay them well. You have to respect them. You have to honor them. And you have to give them something that's worth doing. That group of people will take you a lot of places. Things to avoid. Number one is you don't want to have unrealistic expectations. Because I could do L&O, GHP, and mosquito doesn't mean I can hire everyone to do those three things. And I got to learn not to expect from a guy who might be a very good mosquito technician or a good GHP technician, he will suck at doing lawn and ornamental, because there's 5 things that you have to do in lawn and ornamental more than you have to do with GHP and L&O. You don't have to know diseases. You don't have to know nutritional deficiencies. You don't have to know what that plant looks like when it's in the right order with GHP and mosquito. But with L&O, you got to learn deficiencies, diseases, insects. Does that tree actually look normal? Is that the way it's supposed to look? It takes a higher level of technician to be a person who enjoys working outside. Does the person enjoy working outside? If the person doesn't enjoy working outside and you're going to put him day after day outside in an outside environment, he's going to fail on you. You need to have realistic expectations. Don't expect your employees to act like owners. Employers must lead and manage. A lot of people do not want to manage, and they don't know how to lead. They will put a tech out there and say, this is how you do it. Now go do it. And when you don't do it right, I'll get on your case about it. Understand that if you've got an employee out there with chemical, you should be inspecting that truck on a weekly basis. We have a certain level of decor in this company. In other words, this is our uniform. You don't wear your shirt tucked out. You wear your shirt in. You wear a belt. These are the shoes you will wear. This is how we're supposed to look when we go out every day. Your truck gets washed once a week. You don't leave food in your truck. You don't smoke in your truck. You see, we will measure your chemicals. Understand, your chemical will be monitored. Your mileage will be monitored. I will do random inspections on your clients. I will go out into the field with you once a week. I will go and see what you did after you did the job and inspect it. You have to be a manager if you're going to have people. Or if you can't do it, then you need to hire a manager to do that. See, it's about a system of checks and balances. You have to do it. You can't just send them out and say they're all out in the field and then just deal with the complaints. You can't manage by abdication. You can't do it. Except expecting them to be like me. They're not going to be like you. Having them do too much too fast. You got to take it slow. Compensating the wrong way. I believe that the way the industry compensates, if we don't have training and we don't have education in this business, is because of the way we compensate our employees. You can't tell the person you're paid on production, take the day off, you will not get paid, and then when you come back, you got twice the work to do. And expect them to be encouraged about training and education. If you're not having morning meetings, either weekly, bi-weekly, once a week, every day, 15 minutes. If you're not doing some kind of training every day, going over something every day, people learn by repetition. And you have to continue to repeat things every day. You say, I get tired of repeating things, then you're not good. You're not cut out to be a manager. Because that's what you have to do. Every time a new label comes out, you got to go over that label with everybody. Every time something changes, you got to go over it. Every time, you got to encourage on a daily basis. You got to motivate on a daily basis. You got to pat people on the back on a daily basis. You got to chew people out on a daily basis. Not having training program in place where you're winging it. You need a program in place. Even if it's simple. Even if it's the most simplistic thing you've ever seen. A program is better than no program at all. You need to have measurements in place on how you measure key performance indicators. How do you measure quality? Or are you measuring just quantity? People have to know what they're being measured by so that you weed out the weak performers and reward the excellent ones. Lack of structure will kill you. And then lastly, poaching your competitors. You don't really want to be the guy known for taking all the employees from the competitors. At the minimum, you should have these three things. You should have a job application in place where everyone has to apply. It isn't, I'll just sit down with you at lunch and if I like you, I'll hire you. You need to have an application in place where people apply. If a guy isn't willing to put down where he's worked, what he's done, do you really want him? Require a resume. A simple resume. I want to know about you in one page. You need to set up a written job description of what they're going to be responsible for up front. You can't hire a person. Oh, by the way, you needed to collect bills. Well, you didn't tell me I needed to collect. You just told me I needed to go do. Now I got to go collect bills. That's more time. I'm not getting compensated for that. Do you see the problem? You need to go back to that client because, they called and complained. Well, you didn't tell me I had to do that. I mean, you got to be able to put things in writing. And a lot of the times we think because we have it in our head that automatically people are going to read our minds. That's the worst problem that an entrepreneur has, is getting people to read their minds. People cannot read your mind. This sets an expectation of structure and order from the get-go. In their mind, they're saying, I'm working for somebody who's highly organized, and am I going to be able to deal with this if I'm so disorganized? If I don't have these disciplines in my head, how am I going to be able to work for this guy? He's going to be on me all the time. I probably don't want to work for him. See, at least they know up front. Things to do if you're going to be serious and to be taken seriously. Well, you need to check all their references and all their past employers. You only interview those that you have checked their references. You require a background clearance letter from every state they have worked in. How do you know the guy doesn't have a criminal record? You tell them they're going to have required drug testing. That will weed out a lot of people. I mean, weed out. Okay, sorry. Require a smoke-free environment. If you're a smoker and you show up to a customer's house and you smell like cigarettes and you're going to be in their little baby's room, chances are they don't want you in there. A lot of people do not smoke and don't want people in their house that do. Do I want a guy smoking in a truck that has to be shared by another tech? And that other tech doesn't smoke and he has to smell the cigarettes. Listen, I don't smoke cigarettes and I smoke cigars. I'm not going to force everybody around me to smell my cigar because that's what I do. So you set expectations. If all checks out, then you can have an interview. And then you can weed out all the people. By having this process, you naturally discourage people from applying with you because they're going to waste your time. You say, but I don't want to discourage people. I want everybody to have an opportunity. Yeah, you go try that. Believe me, I tried that and I got burned. I got burned so many times that I still have branding marks on my butt from it, from trying to do that. I've learned. I learned from making mistakes. And look, you're going to make mistakes. This is not going to guarantee you that if you find every single you read. My wife she's halfway through a master's degree in, she's got a bachelor's in business and she has halfway through a master's in human resource management. And this is tough in the real world to do. Then how do you weed out the guys? Give them an exploration day. If you decide you want to hire 5 guys and these 5 guys qualify, take all 5. Take them one at a time for a day. Have them crawl underneath a crawl space. Say, look, if you want to see what this job is like, you can come in. Obviously, we don't have a store. We can't show you something, but you can come in for a day and ride with me and see if you want to do this job. See how they interact with the customers. Tell the customer, I'm thinking of hiring this man. What do you think? Let your customers tell you what they think of him. People are very good judges. Sometimes we don't see things in other people that other people do. Let them spend the day and say, well, we'll let you know. And then after that day, says, look, I've got 5 other people I'm interviewing and I will let you know. Know what they need to make. If you hire a guy who has a mortgage and you can only pay him $10 an hour or $12 an hour and he can't make it with that, he's going to be gone soon. You need to know what people really need to make in order to survive. Is that going to require that guy to work 70 hours a week in order to make that kind of money because he's on production? Can he handle 70 hours a week in the field? In the sun? With the weather? Can he handle those things? It requires a long conversation. See, this is the equivalent of prospecting for clients when you're prospecting for employees. And if you can't invest the time, you will go for the guy that's easiest to get, that requires the least amount of work, and you end up making wrong decisions. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of work and I know what some people would do is, you get sunshine blown up your butt by HR professionals who do this for a living on a daily basis and think it's easy already. But if you're running a business and you're trying to interview people, have an online process. If you got a website, get an application online. Have them fill out an application online. Put the job description online. Say, look, here's my website. Here's the job description. I've had guys do that. I never hear back from them again. Why? They weeded out. They weren't cut out for our organization. And I do that on a daily basis. If all checks out, they rode with you in the field, you got feedback from your clients, your gut says good, then discuss the requirements of working there. You can do that in the pre-interview. Sometimes you can do 2 interviews. A lot of companies do 2 and 3 interviews because they want different people to interview them to see if they get something different. Maybe you can have your wife interview them afterwards. Discuss what it's going to take to really work there. Discuss the things that are going to get them fired up front. You need to talk to people. This is what is going to get you fired. And these are the top 20 things that will get you fired. See, then when you have to fire them, you can't say, well, oh, you didn't tell me. Oh, you change your mind every day. You every single day I come here, something is different. It could be true. Nobody can keep up here. Nobody knows what's going on. This will keep both you and them in check. If you don't like to be told what to do, then you won't submit yourself to any standards and any structure. And then you can't set the tone. You got to set the tone and say, I'm going to abide by all this because I want my people to abide by all this. And if I can't do it, what the hell makes me think they're going to do it? Talk about pay, training requirements. We're going to be talking about training requirements. Put the training requirements in writing. If they're going to need to learn and learn on their own, if they're going to need to take CEUs, if they're going to need to get schooling, if they're going to, whatever it is that they know up front. If the guy says, I'm not willing to learn anything, I just want to go do, I'm a do-do kind of guy, then you're going to end up with a lot of do-do. That's what you're going to end up with. No, that it's not based on tenure, that it's based on performance. Have this in writing up front for your people. Once you hire them, you need an onboarding process. You need something that's going to be structured. Their training has to be structured. You're going to weed out those guys also during the training. After you've done, this is what's painful to a lot of people, because after you've done all the work of interviewing them, checking their background, checking this, checking that, you took them on a trip, you went out with them in the field, everything looks great, and they're in the middle of training, and they decide this isn't for me, I'm out of here. And now you got it back square one. Well, you have 5 others that you put through the process that you can start with. Understand, training is not going to make up for gaps in character, attitude, or aptitude. And make sure they are a cultural fit for you. And culture is something that is developed over time. A lot of times when you're a one-man show, the culture is your personality, it's your attitude, it's your beliefs. You need to find people that have similar to that, but not exactly. You want a diverse mindset of things that you may not see it, and you want critical thinkers. And the problem is, a lot of guys are intimidated by people who are critical thinkers. They don't want those. They don't want to be challenged by their employees. I think you need to have a self-image, a healthy ego that you allow for that. At the end of the day, it's still your decision. It's your call. But at least at the end of the day, you listened to them. They felt listened to, and you might have learned something. So guys, I'm excited. I'm excited about what's coming up. I'm excited about the podcast. I'm excited about the industry. I'm excited about things that we can get done. I'm not the kind of guy that sits around and lets people tell me it can't be done. Don't come to me with problems. Come to me with solutions. And that's what the attitude you need to take around people. Surround yourself with people that are going to elevate you, that are going to exalt you, that are going to help you rise higher. If you're surrounded by turkeys, you can't soar with the eagles. Until next time, you have a great one.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.